Hello everyone. This is going to be a very quick overview of all of the right triangle trigonometry you will need to analyze vector diagrams. As you've been drawing them the last couple of days, and they are in the shape of a triangle, even though they are with arrows, of course, you probably noticed that there would be some right triangle trig that would apply. So I'm going to go through that trig. Now, first of all, of course, there are relationships between the lengths of the sides, the hypotenuse, and the angle when you have a right triangle. And those, of course, are the famous sine, cosine, and tangent operations. The sine of theta is the ratio of the lengths of the opposite side to the length of the hypotenuse. The cosine of the angle theta is the ratio of the lengths of the adjacent side to the length of the hypotenuse. And the tangent of theta is equal to the ratio of the lengths of the opposite side to the length of the adjacent side. So cosine, sine, and tangent are actually ratios of numbers. It's lengths of sides and hypotenuse. Now, sometimes we may know the sides and want to find the angle. So this is like squaring and square rooting, multiplying and dividing. These are opposite operations, or what are known as inverse operations. And so if we know the sides and the hypotenuse and we want to find the angle, we can use inverse functions. Now, be a little careful here. This -1 does not mean 1 over. Okay, it's not inverse like that. It means like squaring and square rooting, doing the opposite thing. So if you take the inverse sine of the ratio of the length of the opposite side to the hypotenuse, you get theta. If you take the inverse cosine of the ratio of the length of the adjacent side to the hypotenuse, you also get theta. And this one we use a lot. If you take the inverse tangent of the ratio of the length of the opposite side to the adjacent side, you get theta. Now, a couple of things. In here, we are going to use degrees, not radians. So you need to make sure that your calculator is set in degrees, especially if you're in trig class at the same time as physics. And also, you got to be a little careful with parentheses. You either have to do the division, then take the inverse of that number, or you have to put parentheses around it like I have. If you don't put parentheses, the calculator will take the inverse tangent of the opposite side and then divide that answer by the adjacent side. That's not right. You want it to do the division first. So be a little careful about that. Now, given these functions, sometimes we might want to find the sides. Let's say we know the hypotenuse and we want to find the angle. Well, we can simply take these two equations and solve them, these two equations, and solve them for the opposite side or the adjacent side. In both cases, this horizontal line means divide. So to move the hypotenuse, we need to multiply it. So we get these two equations. The adjacent side is equal to the hypotenuse cosine of the angle, and the opposite side is equal to the hypotenuse sine of the angle. And you'll see me eventually just kind of jump into these kinds of things without writing this step first. But if you want to, you can always write that step out. One more thing we need to know about right triangle trig. If you have a right triangle, there is a special relationship between the lengths of the sides and the length of the hypotenuse. That, of course, is the Pythagorean theorem. Good old Pythagoras. There was a whole cult built up around him. They were vegetarians. They loved their mathematics. And in fact, part of the Pythagorean theorem was that they were the first ones to figure out the square root of 2. Because if you have a right triangle that has a length of A, length of sides that are both 1 and 1, okay, then the hypotenuse, because the Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared, then c would be equal to the square of 1 squared plus 1 squared, which is the square root of 2. So they knew about the square root of 2, and one of the things that's special about the square root of 2 is that it is a irrational number. It is an irrational number, which means you can't write the square root of 2 as a ratio of two whole numbers. And they thought that was against the gods. So they wouldn't tell people about the square root of 2 existing. And supposedly one of the legends about the Pythagorean cult was that one of their members told the public about this irrational square root of 2. And so in their fury, they took him out into the Mediterranean and tossed him overboard. So they were very serious about their mathematics. So this is all of the trig you need in order to be able to do all of the vector stuff we're going to do in this entire class. Basic right triangle trig. So in the next worksheet, you're going to practice using all of these things and kind of remember your right triangle trig.